You're here for season 7 of the Whole Horse Podcast, now at 110 episodes and counting. I'm your host, Alexa Linton, coming to you from Vancouver Island in Canada. I can't wait to continue to share thought-provoking, edge-pushing, geeky, and often challenging conversations with horse professionals from all areas of our industry who are working to make horses' lives better. This season, you can look forward to more on the specifics of creating enriching, healthy horse spaces, an area I'm particularly passionate about. I'm so excited that you're here listening in, meeting great horsey humans, and hopefully learning a new thing or two about horses and yourself. Let's get started. Hi, everyone, and welcome back. You're here for the Whole Horse Podcast, and I'm Alexa, and I'm here today for my third episode with Shannon Beahen, and I'm so excited to have you back. Thanks for being here.
Thank you for having me. We were just talking before you hit record about, it's very much an honor to be invited once to a podcast. Twice is like, wow, thank you so much. And then third time, even more. So thank you for having me. And also, as I mentioned before you hit record, I'm excited to just chat. I think that's what a third recording grants.
It sure does.
Maybe that we can just hang out.
Yeah, that's exactly it. You're in the VIP zone now.
Oh, okay, yeah. No Grey Goose, though. I don't want any Grey Goose. I've got my Earl Grey.
I love it. She's got her Earl Grey tea. We're ready to roll.
Yeah.
We're ready to roll. It's really beautiful to have you here. It's kind of wild to think that Shannon and I live about an hour apart, which is kind of nutty to think about that I don't know what it is about this West Coast here, but there's just a lot of cool folks going on, within rather short distances. And I'm so grateful for that. And I think, today we want to, have a chat. And I think a part of that, something that I've been really, diving into more and more and more is the connection and relationship to land. And I think the fact that we do live so close together, we do have this connection to this place, this land, Vancouver Island, what that is for us. And I think, or what I'm seeing and feeling is that, I've been to a lot of horse properties, and I literally, I probably shouldn't drop this secret, but if you have a horse property that I haven't been to and you're like, hey, Alexa, will you come and do a session? I'll sometimes just come and do a session because I want to see your horse property. I just love that. And checking out properties, and what I've seen, Shannon, and maybe you resonate with this, is horse properties very often are missing life. This is what I've been feeling. And I'm like, what happened to the habitat? What happened to the life here? It's like someone came in and just went, okay, don't need these trees, don't need this vegetation, don't need these hills. Let's just flatten it out, put some gravel on it. Fencing, electric fencing, call her a day, And I find myself more and more in this place of sadness around that, I guess, of what happened there. What happened there for us that we sort of missed this opportunity to connect, co-create, enliven, steward.
Yeah.
You know what I'm saying?
I absolutely know what you're saying. And I've noticed this in your work more, that you're talking a lot more about land. And I'm so here for that. It's there's such, I'm going to get into all those later because people aren't naming this. The spirit of the land, and that being the container, the larger, broader container of the body of the horse, and then of course of our bodies. So you know what, I'll just jump right into that. So one of the phrases that's coming up for me, I've been doing a lot of, we talked before, I think we're both doing a lot of somatic experiencing work and deep diving in that. And one of the mentors, one of the advisors I work with in that domain, we've actually been talking, because one of the edges I'm working, I do most of my work off property. I do one-on work with clients and their horses to help
Mm-hmm.
their relationships. The best way to do that is to go into their spaces for this very reason, because the space is an extension of the human horse dynamic. And so I don't do much work on my own property. By that, I mean, I don't offer my horse human
Mm-hmm.
services too much on my property, because previously for me, my old trainer brain thought that meant my horses had to be school horses, and that wasn't something I was going to do. I was not going to offer them as by the hour. I don't even care how advanced you are or what your intentions are. If you're amazingly open-hearted and amazingly skilled, I don't want to offer my horses in this by the hour
Yeah.
dynamic under someone they don't know. But I do feel like my horses are ready to be a bit public facing. And so I have started offering, because I don't know why it took me so long to realize, like, okay, well, then don't have people come in to ride them. I will get back to the land in a moment,
Yeah.
but it all ties in. And in fact, like, yeah, I might just storytell with you for this
Yeah.
hour,
Please.
because really, like, conversations about the land are so interwoven that to just be like, we're going to talk about the land as if
Yeah.
it's just this object. It's like the moment I talk about the land, I'm telling stories about the things that happen in and around that land. So if you'll allow me to just run with this, know that,
Oh,
like, the
yeah.
land is the backdrop to what I'm talking about here. And so in this situation of, like, I do work one-on-one with people on their properties, I think my horses are asking for a little more public facing work, but I'm checking in with my own nervous system about how that feels for me and how
Yeah.
that feels for them and how that feels for my land.
Yeah.
And so on the horse end of things, back to what I was saying, before I digress into land talk, because it is so digressive and networked. It took me a while to realize, like, oh, yeah, well, then you can just make the basis for what you're offering in a public facing way consensual horsemanship. Like,
Yeah.
it's that simple, meaning, well, the horses get to say, and I'm the interpreter, right? So it's not about you come in, I'm going to give you this experience with my horses. You're going to learn horsemanship, or you're going to get a riding lesson, or I'm going to show you all their fancy moves that you've seen on Instagram, and I'm going to reproduce that for you in this kind of artificial whale watching, like, let's go chase the whales and watch them breach and go, wow, it's amazing. I know what a whale does, And it's
Yeah.
like, no, most of what hanging out with the horses when I live with them as family members is not the big wow fireworks. And so to allow them to be public facing would mean that I have to kind of set up an agreement with anyone who might want to come be part of that. We are not here to deliver an experience for you. You are here to drop into the networked connection of horse-human relationship. But immediately, and you've been to my space, and I think some people online have seen, like, my ring in the back, which is very much its own
Mm-hmm.
entity. If I'm going to allow people to, outside people to interact with my horses, that's what they're coming to do, is to drop into that networked connectivity. And it might be very boring. And more what I'm telling people is, like, in these kind of situations where I'm not just going to give you this woo wow, like, clinic kind of experience of me being like the showman that's like, oh, let me wow you with my horsemanship skills. It's something much quieter. But so I've been working with this mentor as I work this own edge in my own nervous system about allowing outside people to interface with my horses,
Mm-hmm.
because I am a bit protective about, I guess I'm even protective of a side of myself that in the past would have thought I had to give them away in that kind of way. And wanting to make sure I'm really feeling into that carefully of, like, will I potentially abandon myself in this moment of my prior
Yep.
conditioning of what it is I'm selling as a service provider, quote marks.
Mm-hmm.
Um, and so as I talk with this mentor about this, the question of the land comes up a lot. And it's become very evident to me that for me to do that well has to mean that I feel, and this is, I'm going to use words and concepts to explain this, but it really comes from a felt sense that I have to be in felt sense, right relation with all of those entities I just named. And it's like, well, what entities are you naming? Well, again, on the most basic level, it's like me, the human, the other human that's coming to visit, the horses, and the quote unquote, the land. I was like, well, what's the land? Well, the land is like, well, first thing that comes to mind as being Vancouver Island, like what's one of the main entities for me that I think of when I think of this island? It's the trees.
Yeah.
It's the land of the tall trees. And like more and more, I'm just like, they're the backdrop hosts that are like always present, and I can feel them always present, but then we're almost not naming because they are so omnipresent. And again, I want to get back to the phrase so I can move away from the original sentiment. So the thing that the mentor I've been working with named was the nervous system of the land.
Mm-hmm.
So she said, like, yeah, what you're talking about is you want to make sure that the nervous system of your land is one of the kind of players in this setting that you're creating. And so I'm good with my land. My family is good with my land. The horses, and what do I mean by good? I shouldn't even say good. What does that even mean? We're in deep relationship with the land. We're in constant conversation with it. But there's an awareness the moment another being comes in that something changes. Right? Like if you could get like a vibrational reading, like an ECG, like a sine wave reading, something changes when someone else comes
Yeah.
in. And I'm not even saying something changes for the worse. It's like two different frequencies coming together. Our frequency here is a much like, I'm doing the motion of a wave with my hand. It's kind of oceany.
Mm.
Although sometimes it's not. I mean, I could just go and go. So I'm gonna, yeah, I could just go and go on this topic because, so one, just the nervous system of the
Yeah.
land.
Mm-hmm.
And it's like, how far does that extend? We can just take what we're talking about with horses and what we're learning to feel into with horses. And I think even those of us on the leading edge of feeling into the subtlety of horse, we're still only scraping the
Oh, big
surface.
time. Yeah.
And I really think like some of the next layers in for anyone that's kind of on this journey is to recognize or just kind of like open the awareness to know that if you're trying to feel deeper into horse, you're going to soon have to start feeling into the kind of dispersed awareness and dispersed nervous system of the horse, which is a continuous extension into the landscape. And so if we're not tending to that landscape, we're not tending to the horse. I guess that's where I'll just like kind of wrap that up for the moment. So you can add like your thoughts on that as well.
Yeah. There feels so often like this disconnect, like almost like as if we're playing like dolls or something with our horses. And it's like, oh, here's our little farm. And then we just put our little horses on it. And then they just do the little thing. And there's just not this sense of this is important. Like this, I've been looking, for example, at the way that, say someone buys a new property and they're like, I want a horse, facility on my property. What do we tend to do? The tendency that I've seen is, oh, what did my friend do? Or what did my trainer do? I'll just hire that person who built that thing and just replicate it here.
Right.
But there's this missing piece, this gigantic elephant in the room of like, did you consult the land? Was there any kind of like, what wants to be here? Was there any stepping back, getting into your body and saying, what do my horses need and want?
Yeah.
And what does that look like with respect to a relationship to this land that's going to hold them here, hopefully.
Yeah.
And I think that, there's just this major, I just see it. I mean, we could get into all sorts of things here. And I will name, there's also the piece of we live on unceded territory. We live
100%.
on land that was
Yeah.
stolen, essentially. So there's
Yeah.
that woven into all of this.
Yes.
And I feel that that's a part of what so many people don't want to connect to.
Right.
So we buy a property and we go, well, I'll just clear everything and plop
Yeah.
this facility down and
Yeah.
not think about it.
Yeah.
And I'll just not feel and not think about it. And
Yeah.
that's what I've been being with, I guess. Because
Yeah.
for me, this new phase of my career, my life feels very intertwined with this piece. So I've been, starting to, not starting, but like continuing my journey of really exploring what does this mean, this
Yeah.
disconnect? What is there for us?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, it's like again the layers. It's like the layers of I'm feeling like even going into like the strata, the bedrock, like
Yeah.
the deep layers, in academic speak, we talk about palimpsest, like when you'll find an old artifact and like the artifact has other kind of artifacts written on top of it, or even like art history, you go to like tidy up an old ancient piece of art and then like as you tidy it up you realize there was art under the art, and it's like how deep do we want to go, like this conversation of land, like I could so this is why I'm so here for you talking about this, because you could have a whole podcast devoted just to this and it's
Yep.
like we're still not gonna. So thank you for this. So how do I even speak about this in a way that honors the immensity of it and even just the immensity of what you just named? So first it's just to name that like when we speak of land, we're going not just in the present of what's happening now in the land, not the what are we setting up for the future in terms of how much we tend it well or not well, but then of course also the past and who was here before and what was its, even like native plants,
Oh
and
yeah.
native vegetation, and is that suitable for horses, to bring back in the horse conversation. So I almost become dysregulated, both with excitement to talk about all these possible points of conversation, but also with grief, also with feeling not equipped to even speak to the immensity of some of these topics. So, with that kind of naming of it's a messiness,
Yeah.
it's messy. And so I guess the first thing to name would be if we think it's difficult to be in right relation with horses, current modern circumstances, it gets even messier when it gets into land. And so I don't want to just say, oh, it's messy and then move on, but to say that part of the messiness is we got to sit with it.
Yeah.
And so I want to be clear that when I'm naming my relationship with the land, I am not trying to speak from a place of I know the exact ecological solutions and I am being the perfect steward or guardian, and I also have, I, I'm going to do what I would recommend most people do with horses, and a lot of people are confused about how to be in right relationship with horses. There's
Oh yeah.
so much information and really good intentioned people being pulled in about 25 different directions of do I do this? Do I do this? Do I do this? And it's
Totally.
this kind of schizophrenic approach. And so I can feel that in this. And so it's like, well, just name it's messy, but let's just stay with the messiness. And one of the guiding things for me is what it is for horses. It's like listen
Yeah.
and
Totally.
and and be here. Like be here and open your senses. And before I drop into that, I also just want to name, like coming back to, because I'm getting a lot of more of these kind of requests from people, which is to talk about land, to talk about,
Yeah.
it's people that are thinking about buying their own properties so they can do, Instagram, social media. It's a lot of monkey see, monkey do. And I don't mean that to be belittling. That's, we all participate in it. It's how it functions. But to just be aware that, like, it's one thing for me to see a reel on knitting and be like, I'm going to take up knitting, and it's like, and then I see a reel about like, I don't know, wood carving. And it's like, I'm going to take up wood carving. Like, cool, like run with it. I'm like that too. But to monkey see, monkey do with watching someone homestead or buy property and set up land for horses. I'm not trying to gatekeep this or discourage people from trying to do it, but I'm saying, like, before you jump in, like, really sit with it for a while about why you're doing this. I don't just mean buying land. I'm talking also about, oh, I'm gonna forget boarding facilities. Yeah, I know boarding facilities troubled. But just don't jump in too quickly. Like, sit with it about why you're really doing this and whether you have the capacity. It takes its toll on a person and a partnership and a family to tend land. So that's one thing I want to name. Another thing I want to name, on the topic of like who was here before, and even us living in a place that is considered like one of Canada's most desirable places
Yep.
to be, is the real estate market.
Ugh.
Exactly.
Ugh.
And it operates on us, I mean, even starting
Yep.
to view land once you have it as a commodity,
Yep.
and that's something I've I'm mixed. I don't want to say like I've never fallen for that, because there's always a little bit of like it's built into our Western consciousness that we kind of set ourselves up for the future by buying certain assets that can develop value over time, and then you're going to
Yep.
be set for retirement. And like this is built into how to be an adult in the modern West. And real estate is one of those ways that we're kind of culturally conditioned to relate to land as an asset that sets up you as an individual for the future by exploiting certain kind of market trends. And even some of the decision making is like, oh, well, I'm not going to do that because for resale, that's a bad idea. And that creeps into some of the decision making with my partner and I sometimes.
Mm-hmm.
I'm not going to try and throw him under the bus too much, but it's a little bit more on his end than it is on mine. But no, I don't want to say no shame. There's a little bit of shame in there, but ideally no shame because it's the cultural conditioning working through us.
Mm-hmm.
So I'm naming it just to kind of like to name it as something that enters in, because those are going to be some of the decisions that prevent people from doing the kind of things that we've done on our property. The amount of like sweat, blood, tears, finances we've put into
I
doing
know.
things for our horses that through a real estate agent's eyes see no value in
Yep.
that. And it's like, and who cares?
Yeah.
I'm not going to have eyes that view something so precious as the land. There's that big monolithic word again that makes it just this one individual thing. I refuse to see it through that lens.
Yep.
And so I'm naming it here. I know it's not really sexy to talk about this. I'd way rather get into like the stories of the land, but maybe this is just
Yep.
naming some of because I'm getting more of these calls to talk about this with people. By talk about it, I mean like consultations for how they can also do the thing that I'm doing. And the other thing that you named earlier about like they watch what their friends did and then they're going to replicate that. And it's like, well, this is the top-down model, right? Top-down meaning like I've got a blueprint, I've got a design idea. This is like the idea of like naming your child before it's even conceived, just because like, oh, Brad reminds me of like Brad Pitt. And so I'm going to impose this archetypal idea of like a beautiful man onto my unborn son. And it's like, or you could let his essence show itself to you. I mean, no offense to anyone that's like named their kid before it was born. Maybe you had
Or
really
name
good
their kid Brad.
intuition. Or
You
named
may
their
have
kid
named your
Brad.
kid Brad.
Exactly. No offense to Brads of any kind. But it's the difference between kind of top down versus bottom up.
Mm-hmm.
And so bottom up, the word I've used in the past for the type of land tending I do is emergent emergent land care. And
Yes.
it's like,
Yes.
or even like emergent terraforming, if we want to get more poetic. And it's like, well, what is emergence? Like, emergence is what comes up from below. It's not an idea or an ideal or a blueprint or a design that was created in human minds or trend-driven aesthetics and then slapped onto a thing and forced into it. I mean, the idea of a dressage horse is coming to mind right
Yeah.
now. Like, I've got this idea and this ideal of a posture aesthetic, and I'm going to impose that on a body. We do the same things with land versus emergence. And so like what would it how do we allow for emergence to come through? Well, like just in a practical sense, because people right away, if they're not inclined towards the like deeply intuitive and like receptive to non-human messages, they might think, oh God, I don't know what she's talking about. I can't do this. And it's like it can be way more practical than that.
Yep.
You know, if you're a little bit lacking in funds, that's one of the best things working in your favor because it means you won't be able to buy a property and then just like whoosh, you know,
Totally.
chuck money at it and turn it into the place of your dreams. It means you're going to have to go slow. So
Yep.
if you're already a little bit like resource strapped, brilliant, really good going in your favor. So go slow. You know, I think most gardeners would already know this. Definitely permaculture people would already be kind of dispensing this kind of wisdom. Regenerative agriculture
Yep.
people would be dispensing this kind of wisdom. Like, get to know the land for at least a year. Where does the sun hit at different times of the season, of the year? So sun changes. Like
Yeah.
the sun is not just an ever-present thing. You know, it has a relationship with different aspects of the land. The height of the trees and how the height of the trees change over time will affect where sun hits on the land, which will affect when your horses can get that like early winter or early spring kind of the sun is back, or even midwinter, like a little bit of sunbathing. That's going to be important information. So knowing where to put your horse shelters if you're not buying a property that already has shelters on it. You know, getting to know a big one, I tell people back to Vancouver Island,
Water.
what water. And like the neat thing about water, I will pause in a moment because again, I just like could talk about land forever, but like when we first moved to this property, like we bought a quote unquote as is property, which is code word in real estate for like have fun cleaning up the other person's mess. You got a deal. That's what as is means. So we bought as is. We bought pre-pandemic when we were bright and optimistic and bushy-tailed and, you know, and bright-eyed and full of energy. And about 6 months in, the pandemic hit. We're not the same people we were before as we are now. We're tired. We're about 20 years older, even though it's only been 5 years. And we're like, wow, we really bought diamond, like, I don't want to say diamond in the rough because we're still in the rough. But one of the most difficult things about our property that we didn't realize is that it's a bog. We bought it in the dry season.
Yep.
We didn't have those eyes. We had been living on a mountain before, so we weren't even thinking about bog. Everything was dry on the mountain. You know, it just the water runs down the mountain. And you know, so we've gotten really good at reading water. And, you know, I could go on because like the energy of water and connecting with water and even connecting with the energy of bog, which is a dense, dense energy, is an initiation in you can name this how you want. You can name it from the ecological perspective of just like hydrologics and how water flows, like the just behavioral propensities of water as it interacts with the topography. You could stay at that more,
Mm-hmm.
you know, materialist end of things, or at the more spiritual end of things, the kind of like elemental spirits that you
Mm-hmm.
get to know with bog energy and with
I
and
bet.
with like And with flowing water energy, these are
Wow.
profound. So I'll pause here because I could go and go, and I want to make sure I'm still making sense. But like, these are some of the ways I've come to know our land. And that can be as just kind of scientific and ecological and just like naturalist minded as you want it to be, or as deep dive animist relational as you want to
Mm,
be. So I'll pause there.
wow.
If you want to
I,
hear more about bog spirits, I'm happy to
I
talk to you about them.
I'm so curious.
Yeah.
I remember seeing your property for the first time and you showing me, yeah, some of the ways that you worked with water. And,
Mhm.
I'm just sort of reflecting here on what would maybe another person have done realizing what they had found other than sell.
I think that honestly, I think they would have sold.
Right?
Yeah.
Because what is the other option? Do you just fill it with fill to the
Yeah.
point that it's not even the same thing anymore, right? And
Yeah.
take, like, essentially take away the spirit of that land in a lot of ways, right? Like, I'm just going to make it something different
Or abandon it
or abandon it.
like a horse.
Yeah. Right.
Like, oh, it's not the dream dressage horse I thought it was gonna be. So disposable, on to the next one.
Yeah.
And then some other poor schmuck is gonna get a good deal, but a lot of work.
Yeah.
And it's like, are they a poor schmuck? Are we the luckiest
Yeah.
people ever? The jury's still out.
The jury's still out, but
Talk to me in 10
I
years.
personally think it's amazing. And I can't help but reflect as you're speaking. I'm like, oh my gosh, it's like it's the same thing. Like horses, land, it's the
Yeah.
same thing,
Yeah.
when we think of that emergent quality.
Mm-hmm.
I have to think about, oh, I mean, both my mares, but mainly Raven, because with Diva, I was a lot more in the other camp, of like, you shall be this. And
Mm-hmm.
thankfully I've learned a thing or two over the years. And there's this sense of really allowing emergence, like
Yeah.
what wants to show
Mm-hmm.
up in every, interaction.
Mm-hmm.
And there is so much beauty, joy, surprise, creativity. Like every day with Raven, I'm like, wow,
Mm-hmm.
that was unexpected, like,
Yeah.
and this sense of, as we allow that those qualities to emerge of their own
Mm-hmm.
volition and in their own timing,
Yeah.
what does that feel, look like, and what happens in us as well, right?
Mm-hmm.
Like, I feel like I'm not, how do I say it, like, I mean, I'm doing things, yes, but not
Yeah.
in the same way in any way. And I know that you can speak to this because one of our topics that we wanted to get into today was working with youngsters,
Mm-hmm.
right? And
Mm-hmm.
when we look at, the way that horses are traditionally started,
Mm-hmm.
right away I get like almost like a teary feeling because I think 30-day start or whatever it is, right? And this sense of, we have this short amount of time and we're going to get this, and this done. And if not,
Yeah.
then, you know, who knows what the consequences for that horse and the cost are, right?
Yeah.
So this sense of the emergence just really feels like it just over all the things is
Yeah.
so critical as a paradigm shift, truly.
Yeah. Yeah.
Mm.
Um, you know, I love this conversation so much. And I'm feeling the restraint of time and the amount of directions I want to go with this. So I'm pausing to there's so much emergence in this conversation.
So true.
Um, and it's like, yeah, okay, so one to contextualize some of this that can even like tie, like, wow, we barely talked about horses even in this, you know, and people are used to tuning into the Whole Horse podcast to talk about horses. And I love the emergence of letting there be a breakaway from even like the what is expected in a horse conversation. We might not even talk about horses. But to contextualize what kind of ties a lot of this together is I've been tracking what I would call, I'm going to name it like the layers of the new. It's a placeholder name. I think there's kind of a collective narrative for those of us that are on the whatever we're going to call it, like ethical horsemanship, like the new
Yep.
wave of horsemanship. There's kind of like, I think this collective idea of like, we're evolving. We've evolved towards this other thing. And kind of the placeholder word for what it isn't is like, it's not dominance, right? And so,
Mhm.
like, that's over here, and we're over here doing this other thing. And there's kind of like this idea of like, we're here now, like, we're in the new. And, what's showing itself to me as I've been in the new for a while is like, we're only at the beginning. Like, if you picture like we haven't evolved, we're in an evolution. And this evolutionary process has only begun. And that evolutionary process is actually haunted by, like, in the larger, not to get too dark here, but like in the larger kind of context of the whole planet right now, that evolutionary process is kind of haunted by and is it the end? Like, are we
Yeah.
at the end? And so, like, there's like this race between like the end and the evolution. And then there's some people that don't even like acknowledge that and whatever. So what I just want to name is I'm less and less letting myself be accelerated by stories of the end.
Mm. Yes.
We can let them drop away, which doesn't mean we don't still see the signs. But like, this is the thing about emergence. It's always still unfolding until it isn't. And by then we won't be able to name it. So naming it as the end, like this is, however we want to name that. I won't use all the words that people use to name it, but there's lots of words. And there's kind of just this collective understanding that here we are, we're at the end, right? Like, it's apocalypse time. And it's like,
Things are crazy.
yeah, or like, yeah, it's like climate collapse, or like, and it's like, maybe, maybe. I certainly see signs that point to these kind of things, but also, like, if the animals and if nature thought in that way, it would not be able to continue to provide the nurturing container that it still is. And we kind of need to keep our head in the game with that emergent, life-giving unfolding that is still opening, and remaining open to evolutionary possibilities. And so those of us that are in like the quote unquote ethical realm, that are kind of participating actively or passively in a narrative of like, we've evolved or we are the evolved, just hang on. Good news, bad news. It's only the beginning. You're not evolved yet. But good news is, like, there's so many layers. And why do I name that in this conversation about the land and this conversation about starting youngsters is because I guess I want to name that those of us that are in that evolved realm, as humans, we're not just prone, and I shouldn't say humans, as modern Western humans, in the accelerated information age of hypercapitalism, however we want to name that, are, I'm just going to say it, like, it's just the word I can find right now. I'm not going to be too attached to it, but like, we're a little bit born dominators. Like, it's a little bit in our
Yeah.
cultural conditioning. And one of the ways in which we kind of are innately dominating is not just, it's not enough for us to just unlearn and say, like, oh, I don't do dominance based, whatever. It's to know that this is back to top down, bottom up, emergent, transcendent. It's the ways in which just our minds are always imposing ideas on things. Even if they're seemingly good ideas with good intentions, we still impose them on things. And so that big long explanation, as it comes back to the question of land or to starting youngsters, it's to like the invitation question is, how can we continue to let these others open to us with their organic wisdom, where we are not just not dominating them, meaning we're not chasing them around and getting their, cortisol levels, adrenaline spiking to have our way with them. That's just the first layer. Don't think that just because you're not doing that, you're not still dominating in a way. Because again, what I'm pointing to here is the ways we dominate with concepts,
Yep.
the way we dominate with top-down thinking, and that even well-intentioned concepts can dominate in that they're always trying to name phenomena too soon. They're always trying to impose a direction, even if it's a good one, that kind of shapes, shaping is even that word in positive reinforcement, like in behaviorism, we shape the organism. And I'm saying that emergence is like even letting go of the shaping. Now, like my previous online course that I did talked about like the contact zone and the meeting of the
Yep.
50-50. And that's a concept for me that I'll continue to be a student to forever. Because when I talk about the 50-50, a better word for it is there's like a quantum philosopher, political philosopher named Karen Barad. She has a title of a book called Meeting the Universe Halfway. And that's for me the same idea of the meeting the 50-50. I
Mm.
love just that title. Like, so I'm not saying we just hang back and like let the young horse be the everything. Or if it's we're about to have a child, let the child be the everything, or let the land be the everything. We're in a relationship, but just know, so meaning there's a bit of us and there's a bit of it. But just know that because of the way modern humans have been conditioned, it's almost always there for us to kind of like get our little claws, even our mental claws around the thing. And so just knowing that, like the more we can get out of the language, and I know there's a lot of language here, but like the more we can get out of the concepts, of course, the cliched phrase is like, the more can we get into our bodies and go slower
Yeah.
and do less and watch more. And like, what's that going to look like? I mean, ask anyone that watches my sessions from a distance, in particular, this one young horse that I'm
Yep.
starting right now. It looks like nothing.
Yep.
Some of the time, most of the time, it looks like nothing, and people do come along. And I'm so fortunate where I'm working with this young horse that I've been asked to start because her owner is kind of like a second generation. We talk about like the layers of the new. This is an owner that I worked with her and her previous horse in the past. So she's already kind of on board with a lot of these concepts. And she, because we've worked together in the past, has already transformed her property into a track system.
Yep.
And she kicked out all the boarders that she inherited when she bought the property, and it was a boarding facility. She slowly kicked them out. I don't, that sounds very abrupt. She slowly kind of gave word this is no longer going to be that kind of boarding facility. There was all the little cells.
Yep.
Gave them word because it was just there's too many people, too many horses, and back to the idea of like the nervous system of the land. The problem with a lot of boarding facilities isn't just all the problems we already know,
Yeah.
but it's like, how does that nervous system of the space speak to itself? It doesn't, because they're all individualized, closed off
Yep.
cells with their own really dysregulated energies. Often, I'm sure there's exceptions, but this is often what boarding
Yep.
facilities are like. So like the compartments of the system, it's not being allowed to be a system.
Yep.
Everything is individualized. And actually, some of what like maintains the individual cells is kind of like a hostile energy, even.
Yes. Electric fencing, that sort of
Well, and even
thing.
I'm talking about the people,
Yep. Oh, totally.
and hostile, I'm not even trying to like blame them, but like because of their experiences at other facilities have maybe learned to be certain ways around other horse people. And so they're just trying to protect
Yeah.
themselves and
Yep.
they're just trying to do what their trainer told them. And they have this trainer and they're doing this with their horse. And this person has that trainer and they're doing that with that horse. And it's not allowed to be a system. So back to this young horse I'm starting, my success with this beautiful young horse and the gentleness of how I've been able to start her is a little bit about me being a little bit in I've been in the new for a while now. And so
Yeah.
I've like developed my techniques to softer and softer and softer. So there's some credit to me. And there's some credit to this horse just being amazing, this young horse. And there's some credit to the owner. Actually, it's a lot of credit to the owner because she's the one that allowed that land to
Mhm.
become a healthy nervous system. Where now, when I work with this horse, there's no longer me having to be this kind of like super powerful like wizard that comes in and creates this like protective bubble around this one horse that like holds out the like chaotic energy of the boarding facility long enough that I can like work in this quiet space. And that would be amazing if I could even do that. But that's so much work.
Oh my gosh, I'm just like having reflections as a body worker.
I bet.
Oh
I
my
bet.
God. I'm like,
Yeah.
oh.
Imagine if the space was holding you as the body worker so you could hold space,
I mean,
not even,
I know what that is, right? I've had that. I remember when I was at the beginning of my career and I share this because of that emergent space.
yeah,
I was standing in a round pen. The property, the horses were all in a herd around this round pen. And they
yeah,
were, had a beautiful owner who allowed them a voice. And I
mhm,
remember this moment like it was yesterday when that round pen gate was open and those horses had, that was a part of their world, right? They would just
yeah,
come in and out and do their thing and roll the
yeah,
sand. But I was there that day, and every single, I swear to God, it was like four horses in a row came into the round pen of their own volition, stood in front of me, put a body part in front of me, and said, "Hey, can you just
yeah,
do a little here?"
yeah,
And when they were complete, they walked off, and then the next
yeah,
horse would come.
yeah.
And it just, yeah,
Wow.
four or five horses. And I was
Yeah,
like, I'm standing there going, what the actual is happening? Like, what is
yeah,
happening here? And it was
yeah,
just these horses had been encouraged in their emergent
yeah,
experience
yeah,
to express themselves and to ask for their needs to be met. And
yeah,
they felt safe enough in their herd to feel that they could come and ask of their free will for what they needed. And it was just
yeah,
like, I've never had an experience like it really
yeah.
since,
That's a that's exactly like that's the perfect example. And then you as the like, people are also like the public conversation is going to an awareness around like the problems with guru culture, right? And of or the ways in which we as so-called like experts in a field are at danger of like being held in this position. And it's like, yeah, because when you're in that mode of like the human as the like we shape everything, of course that's one of the byproducts. But what you just described there is like, then you could be in the receptive mode as someone with these like capacities and trainings and magic to help balance bodies, but you don't have to be doing all the work of like, I'm going to control I'm going to be the sorcerer that comes in and controls all the elements to try and facilitate a healing experience. You could take more of like a equal player, like you
yeah,
could be in the more receptive mode of just like them coming to you and they're kind of participants in their own, I don't even want to say healing, but like rebalancing, which is always a rebalancing of the collective. I'm sure you
oh
probably
yeah.
left that. I mean, I'm curious, like, did that feel different leaving that situation than it would? Yeah.
I felt like magic had happened. I felt
Yeah.
like,
It's less
I
effort.
felt shifted in that,
Yeah.
in my
Yes. Yes.
perspective, in my openness, it was like when you have an experience that's like a paradigm shift
Yeah.
because you realize in that moment that there's so much more happening than you have ever dreamt of. Like there is this
Yeah.
whole community occurring that you just hadn't been aware of,
Yeah.
this whole thing happening, right? Like I think of
Yeah.
that when you speak, I'm always thinking of like mycelium because like who doesn't think of
Yes.
mycelium?
Yeah.
And
Well, I
that
think a lot
sense
of
of
people
like
don't.
I'm walking
Yeah.
around and
Yes.
this is holding me. This is
Yes.
supporting me. But like I don't, you know, I for many years I didn't think of that. It was just happening. in
Yeah.
and supporting me anyways, and doing the things that mycelium do,
Mhm.
um, without my kind of awareness of that,
Yeah.
right? So
Yeah.
this piece of, and I think that's why this passion is coming forward so strongly, because as a body worker, my God, yeah, you talking about this, like having to be this sorcerer going to a barn and balancing everything, and like
Yeah.
you can't imagine. Oh no, you
Mhm.
can, because you've done it, is like trying to hold that kind of space
Mhm. And stay
is
conscious as opposed to
exhausting.
well, because then what happens for us, even if we're like resourced enough and like whatever other words we want to give to that, talented enough, skilled enough,
Yeah.
capacious enough to do that, it's hard to stay present. Like
Oh,
it's becomes a situation where if you do that too much, you have to compartmentalize.
you have to. The things that you have to turn away from.
Yeah.
Like, I would go into a barn and there would be 8 other horses stabled, and then, one would be weaving, one would be cribbing, one would be pawing
Yes.
at their door.
Yeah.
Everybody would be hungry.
Yeah.
And I'm working on one horse. All the other horses are yawning. And
Yeah.
and just I'm like, what do I do with this? I have to
Yeah.
turn away
Mhm.
from all of this
Yeah.
to try to kind of come to this horse in a
Mhm.
good way.
Mhm.
And yeah,
And then take 2 days off to like sleep
right,
off the grief and try and
completely.
recalibrate your own senses or become another frazzled part of this troubled
Yeah,
industry that even though we're kind of like identifying as being like the more evolved new breed of horse people, that the kind of toxic elements are still leaching in. And so rather than just name them, because one way to do it, and kind of when I first came to the work, I was kind of mixed around like, do I continue to still work with people who aren't quote unquote as evolved as the type of work I'm trying to do? It's a tough question. Or do I only select for the ones that are willing to do it my way? And I'm still a bit torn, but I will say that the deeper my work goes, and I've had to take big chunks of time off.
yep,
And I've had to hit very, I mean, and other stuff going on in my life as well, like deep, deep places of grief and of recovering and of soul searching and these kind of things. And I really don't, sometimes we can't control whether we're brought to these places. That's part of the emergence of life. And I mean, again, here's one of those moments where there's so many different directions, but I'm sure we're coming up on
got like
time soon.
3 minutes, which is like, what
Yeah.
the?
Well, I'll just say this. Well, I won't just say this. One thing that comes up there is for those that aren't open to the emergence, the grief is where it will come and get them,
Oh yeah.
or the death is where it will come and get them, or the sickness is where it will come and get them. And I don't mean that as punishment. I mean that if those things come for you, or it'll be the horse that doesn't is resistant to all other forms of training and will only say no. I mean, this has become the dimension I work in. And, so if anyone listening is kind of like, what are these two on about with the emergence? And I'm kind of interested, but how do I bring more of it into my life? Well, like do court it. And there are definitely like kind of courtship aspects to, I mean, courtship is a great kind of relational posture to be in if we want to try and operate from this place of emergence. So is going slow, so is listening, but that would be part of good courtship,
Mm-hmm.
would be to observe, and to flirt a little back and forth. But if anyone is like, I don't know what they're talking about, I don't know how to do this, well, you need not worry because it's coming for you.
Mm-hmm.
It's
Totally,
coming for
it will
you
happen.
anyway,
Yes.
in the forms of grief, in the forms of death, in the forms of, like I say, the horse that is resistant to all other forms of training and will only say no. But maybe what you will do differently after hearing this conversation, when those things come for you anyway, is that instead of seeing them as like the abhorrent feature that is here as punishment or as an indication of something that went wrong, that you don't see it as that. Like it's phenomena. it's phenomena trying to talk to you. And even the grief stuff, even the death stuff, even the sick stuff, and I shouldn't even say even, perhaps mostly there is the teachings of emergence. But do people like, you and I a favor and help us out, because we don't want to be working alone in this. Like, it's so much better. It's so much better for all parties when we're not the heroes trying to work as individuals on a wounded system that is totally not connected. And instead, we're just another node in a very open, connected system where we're all kind of reciprocally receiving both help and benefit. And we're helping and we're receiving help, helping and receiving help. And you helping me in one instance isn't me taking something from you, because it's only that when we are the compartmentalized things and we're not plugging into the larger collective. And I say this, I wasn't able to go more deeply into that young horse, but just that takeaway of this other way of starting a young horse is not just about bringing softer methods to her. As part of this whole atmosphere and environment that she's growing up in, little indigo child that she is, that is one of just spaciousness at the atmospheric level. So it's way less about what techniques are you going to use to bring along the youngster in a softer, more ethical way. Some of it is techniques. Most of it is this networked openness.
Wow. Damn. Well, that is something. That's some kind of conversation.
Well, I listened to you talking with Loki about his track system. I listened to you talking with, is it Jane?
Yep.
I'm so here for more of these conversations. Like, it's not just like, oh, check mark, we've talked about track systems. What's the next topic? Nah, dude. Like, there's so much
There's
with
so
this
much.
idea of space and horses on the land. So I'm so grateful that you're opening this up.
Yeah, me too. It's such juicy, important conversation. And I'm so grateful for you to be here and share share you with us. Because I think this conversation, this emerging conversation is so critical and essential for us. And I know that there's people out there that are listening that just had a lot of ahas. I know I have as well. So I'm very grateful for you being here today.
Thank you.
Wonderful. And thank you for everybody listening. I will list Shannon's info on the Whole Horse website. And you can also go back and listen to her previous 2 podcasts with me. And I'm just like, as always, the perfect conversation for this moment. And so excited to be back with you sometime soon as well.
More coming soon.
Wonderful. Thanks, Shannon.
Okay.
Bye for now, everyone.